Welcome to the Leadership Brothers podcast. My name is Gibson Piper.
And I'm Brock Piper.
And as you guessed, we are brothers. I am the oldest of four boys. Brock is in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I am 30 years old.
I am 23, turning 24 in about a month.
Nice. So the whole point of this podcast is to grow as leaders, as young men together, but also individually, and just kind of get better overall at leadership. And so that's what we're starting this podcast for. And that's what our goal is basically just to improve every day as leaders. And a big part of that is going to be our journey together and kind of discussing our journey together. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about extreme ownership. We have Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It is a New York Times bestseller. They are former Navy SEALs, and it is my favorite book on leadership. We're going to split this up, and we don't know how long yet, but we're going to go over the part one today, which is the first 4 chapters and the intro. And depending on how long it is, we may split this episode into 2. But I'm very excited to get into this with you. What do you think of the book?
Dude, well, I haven't actually finished the entire book.
Oh, you haven't read the whole book yet?
I've had it for 7 years probably, but I've never finished the entire book. So I've only read literally the first part that we're going to discuss right now.
Good.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
There are so many things that we can get, I'll talk about later. Like we would do, I had training at my job, and we'd have I was just dissecting every single thing that the trainer and the leader of our team was trying to teach us. And I was like, okay, how is he doing? Is this effective? Is he ineffective? Is he how would he respond to these questions? And I was using all these things that they were kind of doing, and it was really fun. It was really cool to think about it, actually think about it. Normally you just go and don't think about it. So it was really fun to read that and get to see it firsthand in the real world and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the biggest part of this, in my opinion, is how do we apply this to the real world?
Yeah.
Which is, obviously it is in that book. First things first, I recommend going and buying the book, period.
Oh, yeah.
I think everybody should own this book, because everybody in their life has some sort of leadership in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has a leadership role in their life, no matter what it is. So basically, we'll just start off with the intro that I like to preface, right? When I was reading that, the biggest thing that stood out to me was when they talk about being a Navy SEAL and being in the SEAL teams.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the team, right? The team comes first. And they talk about team guys. They recruit and develop team guys. So for me, my biggest thing I wrote down was, what is my definition of the type of guys that you want to be team guys? What do you think that is?
I think the number one thing that quickly pops in my head is loyalty. I think to have a good, team member, you have to have a loyal person that you can just know you can trust, and they'll have your back at any point in time. There's not even a thought, not even a question. Just hey, I know Gibbs got my back. I know he's got my 6. Because I know he's loyal to the cause because he believes in it. everything like that. So I think loyalty would be the number one thing for me.
Yeah,
what would you think? Did you write down?
I didn't write down anything very particular. I just was thinking about what the kind of, because I coach basketball, what the kind of qualities that I would want in a basketball player or a player on my team. Tough, smart, and aggressive were the 3 that kind of stood out to me, because you're gonna miss shots. And I talk about this all the time in basketball. You're basically playing for failure. You're gonna miss 60% of your shots on the offensive end. The best shooters in the world only make 40%, from 3.
Yeah.
So it's how do you deal with that failure? And the biggest thing for me was that toughness and the aggressiveness and the ability to kind of bounce back and have the resilience and just play defense no matter what. So that's where I kind of thought okay, that's the kind of guys that I want. And then my next thought was, how do you develop that?
That's a very good question, because I think when you being a coach right now, I have the aspirations to be a football coach. Same difference. Leading a team of sport. So being any level of coaching, you have to be able to be the leader and develop the skills, and that's probably one of the hardest things to do, as far as you know, because you can when you especially high school level, which is what you're coaching. When you see a guy, you're like, man, that's a tough kid. I don't know how to work on it, you know. So honestly, I don't think I have an answer for that. I don't think I'm only 23. I think I'm too young to really have an answer for that. To be completely
Well, yeah,
honest.
it's a tough question.
Because I've never had the firsthand experience. Like I've never actually coached a team. I've never actually, you know, I've been around you and Dad and you know, coaching and stuff like that. But I don't think I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah,
Which is
it's
okay.
It's
but,
something to think about.
yeah.
You know, because going through your journey, you're gonna come across those type of questions, those situations.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can know right now, okay, I need to figure out how the elite of the elite develop their toughness and their aggressiveness. And sometimes the qualities that you want are just, you know, they're either born with it or not. I think basketball IQ or even sports IQ is something that you are pretty much, you have a feel for the game or you don't,
Yeah.
to a certain extent. So it's like, where can we leverage that difference? How can you impact the players on your teams and develop their toughness, develop their aggressiveness, develop their IQ, whatever you're looking for in those team guys. So I thought that was an interesting thing about of how do you develop the team guys, not just what you want.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah.
That I need to personally dive into.
For sure. Well, that's why we're doing this.
No, I know. That's
So
what
that
I'm saying,
way you can take that away and I can take it away, because I'm the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, how do I develop that? How do I impact guys on my team or guys who might not even be on the team?
Yeah.
You know,
For sure.
because you talk about a program toughness. That's kind of what it's about too. You know, it's like you want specific players and guys around you when you're playing.
Yeah.
How do you develop that? Give that some thought. One of the other things I took a note on was Leif talked about where their first encounter in Iraq and how there was a squirter guy running away, and they didn't know if he was a target or, you know, what he was, and they kind of went after him. Two guys went after him. They got him, and then they were kind of trapped. They were broken off from the team. They didn't really know, you know, what was going on. And what he said was, I took a breath, I relax, look around, make a call. Right? That to me is it's a number one advice for coaches out of this book. That is not like a part of the leadership strategy and extreme ownership.
Yes.
Because I think coaches get caught up in those emotions, in those moments. And when the game's going and you're even watching the game, even if the game starts slowing down, in your head there's a thousand things, all these decisions you have to make. You know, you're as if you're the head coach, you're talking about handling personalities on the court, off the court, in the middle of a game. So not only are you trying to execute your strategy, you got to deal with these knucklehead kids who are not used to maybe this environment.
Yeah.
You know, so there's so many things that can happen in 1 or 2 seconds, right? So relax, look around, make a call. And that's actually one of the things that I use for my point guards. You know, the game can go really fast. Relax, look around, make a call. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's I think you can apply it to like almost anything in life, you know. I feel like whatever is like thrown your way, if you just relax, you know, take a breath, you know, maybe, you know, what is it? What was it?
Relax,
look
around,
relax, look around,
make a
and then
call.
Make a call. Okay, yeah. That's what I'm saying. So as long as like, you know, say like you're you're stuck in traffic and you're late to whatever, like a big meeting, you got a big production thing going on, you got to do a presentation. And you're running late, you know, you could relax, just like instead of freaking out and maybe going to driving recklessly and get into an accident, you can relax, take a breath, and then you could legitly like, you know, make a call of like, okay, sorry, I was like, you could legitly make a call to your boss, you know, but like you could, you know, I feel like it's a lot of like different ways you could apply it.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And then he introduces the concept of no bad teams, only bad leaders.
Love that section.
Yeah, but it's when I first read it, I was like, okay, I've been around some bad teams.
Yeah.
But we'll get into what he actually meant by that. And I think the only, or I guess the overarching thing was the only meaningful measure for a leader is whether the team succeeds or fails.
Yeah.
I love that. I love
my
that.
favorite thing, probably that I read.
That was
one of my favorite things.
Yeah, I love that. All right, well, let's get into chapter 1. So chapter 1 is called Extreme Ownership. This is introducing the concept of extreme ownership. And one of the things that I really loved is it was in the footnote, and it was, I can't remember who it was from, but it said war is the realm of uncertainty. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And just for the record, when we talk about war and things like that, I have zero experience with that. I can't even understand the magnitude of some of the things and the amount of respect I have for both Jocko and Leif and for anybody who served for our country. So I'm not trying to equate what we're talking about in this book, because the next thing is a blue on blue, which is friendly fire. And I'm not trying to equate that to anything that I could actually understand or comprehend.
Yeah.
But I do think we can take some things from this book to our personal lives, just at a lower magnitude. So I just want to make sure that
that's definitely, yeah,
I get that out of the way, because
yes.
it was just something I was thinking about. I was like, this is it's a little intense.
Yeah.
I want to make sure.
Yeah, the way they lay it out in the book, they start with this like really intense story. I'm talking about and it's really fun to read these stories, and then it goes into then it goes into like these like different sections like that. But it's so intense, it's hard to like look at that and be like, how could we apply that to something, like you said, on a lesser magnitude. But we, you got to make sure you really understand that these guys are in like the thick of it, and it's like something that we can never comprehend.
Yeah. I mean, it's just.
But useful, and we can definitely pull away things.
Oh yeah, and I think there's lessons. I mean, first of all, there's lessons in everything, right? So I think, but I just want to make sure that I can't even understand half the things they went through, and a lot of respect for that. But
definitely.
the story that you were mentioning was the blue on blue.
Yeah.
Right, friendly fire. So basically, wires got crossed, mistakes were made, and I think an Iraqi soldier was killed and a couple more wounded. And then Navy SEAL was wounded as well.
Yeah.
And in that story, he talks about the mistakes that were made and whose fault it was.
Yeah.
Right? And so I wrote down no blue on blue. That's a term that I will use for my teams, as in no turnovers.
Okay, yeah.
Right? No, basically don't do things that are that are avoidable.
Yeah.
That will impact us negatively on or off the court. Another phrase that I've heard for that is control your controllables. Right?
Yeah.
So stuff you can control, stuff you can't control. You can't control, I mean, to a certain extent, you can't control if a shot's going to go in. Yeah. You can do your best.
Oh, yeah.
You can have all the perfect form mechanics. Steph Curry is going to miss 50% of his threes. Right? So if you control your controllables, after you miss a shot, after you make a mistake, you can control your reaction. You can control how you impact the team going forward. So that's why I like the no blue on blue or control your controllables in that story. And then following through that story, he talks about where at the aftermath, where he got all his emails and everybody was mad, and just I wrote down, we've all been there to a certain extent. Right? We've all been in a situation where we screwed up. We know we screwed up bad.
Yep.
Right? I mean, just in our own lives, whatever the bad means, but we've all kind of gotten in trouble.
Yeah.
And I remember times where I've gotten in trouble, and you just want to crawl and hide. For me, at least. When I was younger, especially, where it's just like you don't want to even talk to anybody, you don't want to deal with it, you don't want to face facts, you want to get out.
Yeah.
Right? Your parents are talking to you, your coach is talking to you, like something went wrong, and you're getting a lecture from somebody you let down.
Oh yeah.
That's one of the worst feelings for me.
Oh, hands down.
Yeah, it was just, and just the. Honestly, I think the worst part was the wait. Like the wait for the punishment was like, oh, this is gonna be terrible.
Yeah, and your mind starts racing. What it's gonna be and how it's gonna affect everything in your entire life. Like it just spiral. Yeah,
and so when I wrote that down, and then the next thing Jocko asked was who to blame. Who is to blame for this?
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of that chapter for sure.
Who is to blame? And that introduces the concept of extreme ownership. There's only one person to blame in all these situations. And that's the leader. Right? Yeah. The leader is ultimately responsible for everything that happens. So when he had his superiors come in and kind of observe their debrief, he took ownership
Yeah.
of everything.
Yeah, and I love the way he did it because he asked whose fault is it, like four or five times, and everyone, I respected that. Almost every time he asked a question, one of the guys like raised their hands essentially like, "Hey, it was my fault. I didn't follow the orders, or it was my, people trying to take it," and he was just like, "No, it's none of your guys' faults. It's all me." With his whole unit there and all of his like, his bosses essentially, and he just took it. So it was a really cool story to read. And I was like, wow, this dude's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, this dude's awesome.
Yeah. And but one important note that I didn't really grasp the first maybe one or two times I read it was not only did he take ownership, but he had a plan to fix the problems. Right. So he then prepared a presentation of what went wrong, why it went wrong, and what the next steps were to fix it. So to me, it's not just like, yeah, it's my fault.
Yeah.
I take ownership of everything. It's like, that's cool. But like, okay, like
what does that
that's
mean?
great.
Yeah,
Yeah. But like, what's next? Like what is the solution to these problems and these issues? And that's where he came up with it. And he said, basically, here's what happened. Here's why it happened. Here's what we're doing to fix it. And so I think that's important for leaders to kind of recognize is like, you can take extreme ownership, but if you don't fix anything, well, you're not actually owning the problem.
Yeah, it's just kind of it's like a, hey, hey, it's my bad.
Yeah, right.
Do better next time, guys.
Right,
It doesn't. There's no magnitude and no meaning to it. Essentially, if you're just like, hey, it's my fault. You guys can do better next time. Hope let me know how it goes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so the reaction though was basically after the blue on blue happened, after the friendly fire, the reaction was to set up training scenarios where they were basically guaranteeing a blue on blue was going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Or almost guaranteeing. But it was almost unavoidable for that catastrophic mistake to be made in training. So that way they could then prep the leaders under them of what was going on and why it's their fault. Right? Because it's really hard to lead somebody else. And when something goes wrong, basically like, well, it's your fault. You can't just say that, right? You can't be like, well, extreme ownership says it's your fault. That's where the weirdness would get involved, right?
Yeah.
Extreme ownership, if you're training somebody to be a leader, you have to kind of delicately say like, hey, whose fault is this? And then let them kind of almost guide them to the part where they realize, okay, it's my fault. I'd take ownership of all of this. But if you just accuse them, that's not going to go well.
No, it's like attacking them almost.
Yeah. So basically, to me, that showed that a leader is ultimately responsible for everything because of their reaction to the blue on blue.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to go to the book for just a couple of these. I still don't want to read a ton out of the book. I want to let the book kind of live on its own and have people read it, for themselves, because I think that's important. And I also just wouldn't feel too right, just reading the book on a podcast. It just doesn't seem right. But I had a lot of highlighted and underlined pages in here. So I just kind of wanted to read this. This is from page 30. When he talks about the principle of extreme ownership.
Yeah.
Said when subordinates aren't doing what they should, leaders that exercise extreme ownership cannot blame the subordinates. The leader bears full responsibility for explaining the strategic mission, developing the tactics, and securing the training and resources to enable the team to properly and successfully execute. If an underperformer continually fails to meet standards, then a leader who exercises extreme ownership must be loyal to the team and the mission above any individual. If underperformers cannot improve, the leader must make the tough call to terminate them and hire others who can get the job done. It is all on the leader. I thought that was interesting because that's not easy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you and applying this to sports or coaching, that basically means you may have a very good player, but if overall they're actually impacting the mission to win a basketball game, in a negative way, you have to find a different solution.
Mm-hmm.
And dealing with teenagers, that can get a little dicey,
Yeah.
right? And so that to me was just like, okay, there's gonna be some tough decisions had to be made if you want to win, and it's all on the leader. That's it. It's all on the leader. So if you're the leader, it's all on you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of weight to carry.
It is. When you really think about it, you know, especially talking about sports, because I mean, I guess it's not easier when you're in a business world like they're talking about. You know, it's like, oh, hey, this sales representative isn't hitting his numbers, 6 months in a row. We got to fire him.
Yeah.
You know, we'll get another sales guy come in and he's doing good.
Right.
That's easier because it's a business. There's turnover in business, and that's kind of how business works. But we're talking about high school kids, you know, with, everything that comes with, high schoolers. You have to be able, it's like, hey, the point guard's, he's not doing well. We got to bench him and he's a senior. We're going to put in a sophomore. Just being, like you just say that, like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to do. That is not an easy thing to do at all. But like you said, being a leader, make that call, relax. He's not working. Look around and make the call. Okay, senior, you're benched, come, next guy up. That's going to be better for the team. So, which I talked about earlier about being loyal. As one of my biggest defining things, being loyal to the cause and to the team of winning a championship. That's the ultimate goal when you play sport. So, being loyal to that, and you can't just be like, oh, I like this guy. He's a senior. It's senior night. Let's play him. I'm like, no, let's bench him because we're going to win a championship. This guy's going to be better for our cause and for, believing. Chapter 3, we talk about that, believing in, what we're going to do. So, yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, on senior night, let's get up by 25 and play the senior for 20 minutes, right? Let's not just start him ceremoniously.
Yeah.
Let's get up by a lot and play him late.
Exactly.
Let's take care of the mission first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mission first.
Yeah, and that's what is the kind of the next thing is where he says you must remove individual ego and personal agenda. It's all about the mission.
Mm-hmm.
This has by far been the hardest part for me personally, and we'll definitely get into this because there's a chapter about your ego, which is definitely for me. It's been the hardest challenge.
Yeah.
Just personally doing, trying to live out extreme ownership. But also I think coaching at the high school level, actually I shouldn't say that because I haven't coached at the professional or college level.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I don't know, but I can tell you that when I was younger, I had a much bigger ego than I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I had a much bigger ego 2 years ago than I do now. I think as we grow older, we kind of learn, the lesson of what your ego can do.
Yeah.
So I would assume that coaching at the high school level, that's where the ego is the biggest. But then again, you watch some NBA games and it might be big there too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's all about the mission. I think that's the overall from chapter 1, right? It's all about the mission. Did you have any other notes or anything that you hit on that I missed?
Yeah, no, I just wrote down, you must own everything as a leader. Literally everything that comes your way as a leader is just like, yeah, that's my fault, and being able to adapt to it and then being able to fix it and have a solution. And then I wrote, extreme ownership is the number one characteristic in anything, period. Like extreme ownership has to be your number one goal. You can't just put it on the back burner and be like, yeah, I have extreme ownership, and then something's going wrong and you're like, I'll just deal with that later. It's just like, no, I'm the leader. This is my responsibility. I'm going to take care of it now. I'm going to, whatever it may be. So that's kind of, that was one thing I wrote down that I really liked.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll end on was on page 37, he kind of talked about blaming others.
Yeah.
Right. And I think as basketball coaches, from my standpoint, so many times we blame everything else but what we did or didn't do in practice. Blaming the refs. Blaming fouls, blaming missed shots, whatever it is, bad defense.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that I've done it before. It's like, man, these refs are terrible. We just watched the game and we just were complaining how bad the refs were the whole game, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's like we're blaming the refs.
Yeah.
So that's with extreme ownership, there's no blaming the refs. There's no blaming everybody else. It's you.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, we weren't
I was like,
a part of the game, but I mean,
we're just fans at this point.
yeah,
right? You
but
know?
still, it still goes to show it's like so many other things can be blamed.
No, there's a scapegoat for almost anything you can think of. You know, so I think like you're saying, me and you're just watching a basketball game on almost any sport, and there's a sport is huge. Maybe like actively trying to be like, okay, instead of saying, oh, that ref made a terrible call, like just try not to blame anything and just enjoy the game and just watch it, and then like your mindset might start, because I think for me at least, I personally will blame a lot of things. I mean, not a huge thing. Oh, my car door handle broke. Oh, the car's 20 years old. It's terrible. You're like, no, you ripped it off. You ripped it off because you're in a rush, whatever. So it's like being.
Did you do that?
I really did that. Yeah.
Okay.
Like literally, I closed and I ripped the inside of the door handle off, so I have to open like from the back window. Anyways, so you lost my train of thought with that. But yeah, no. So I think it's actively, like doing the little things and like paying attention to the small details of like, hey, let's just like, if I'm a leader of a team, when I watch something or do something, you might not be leading the team at that moment in time, but if you can like learn to stop just like looking things to blame at, I feel like you could like slowly implement that in your team and your leadership skills. Like,
Yeah.
do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, for
Like,
sure. Yeah. I have a question. So
Great.
you have a girlfriend.
Sure do.
How many times when you guys are upset with each other do you blame her or something she did
Yeah.
made you upset?
Yeah.
That was actually your fault.
How many times have I blamed her?
I'm just saying that was
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to count. I'm just saying
No,
like
yeah. I think in the last, I've been here for 4 years now, and I think in the first 3 years, I never blamed myself. Not a lot. I mean, maybe here and there, but I think in the last year,
well, it's not blaming yourself, right? You take ownership.
Yeah.
That's a better way to phrase it.
Okay. Yeah.
Because blaming yourself makes it seem like it's like a negative thing.
True.
In my opinion.
True.
So if you're like, oh, I blame myself for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I blame myself for us losing that game. Like
Yeah.
no, take ownership and figure out what you can do better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I ask, because it's like in my relationship, in my marriage, I know a lot of times I'm like angry at her or the situation and refuse to accept that I might be the problem or I might have caused the problem.
Oh, okay. Now I'm fully tracking with you. Oh, that's all the time.
Right.
Yeah, that is probably constantly, because it has to do with like my ego and my stubbornness of like, there's no way that I'm communicating with you perfectly, Carl. I'm communicating with you, and it's your fault that you can't understand what I'm saying. But in reality, the way I think is way different than she thinks, and I have to be able to understand that and be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, it's my fault. I'm not communicating well enough. Here, let's do this and fix it.
Yeah.
Which I think since I started this book in the last like month or two, you can she could attest to that. I have been trying to be better about like, hey, this is my fault. Like, what can I do to make sure next time you understand what I'm saying better? Stuff like that. But yeah, so
but the weird thing with that is you have to make sure you phrase it right.
oh my gosh, man, phrasing is everything. Not just speaking to your significant other.
Oh, yeah.
Especially to kids in high school, they hear one thing and then they just stop listening, and then they all heard was your first sentence, but your second sentence is the thing you wanted them to get. So I understand definitely. Definitely.
But I just want to bring that up because that's been one of the one of my challenges, especially in marriage, has been my refusal to take ownership of the problems that I may have caused.
Yeah.
So the quicker you can learn that,
the better.
The better you'll be off. Yeah, because
sure.
just having that awkwardness of being upset, I hate it.
Yeah.
Just with everybody. But just when you're married, you're around each other 24/7, and it can cause a lot of problems. So that was one thing I want to make sure you thought about.
Definitely.
Going forward, especially too. I think that'd be beneficial for you.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Anything else on chapter 1? We good on that?
No. Yeah, I'm great.
Okay.
On chapter 1.
So that was extreme ownership, chapter 1. Now, chapter 2, no bad teams, only bad leaders.
I loved this story.
Did you?
The story was
You want to talk about it?
awesome. I mean, yeah, I can talk about it. So, you can jump in if I leave some things out because you've read it more than I have. So essentially, they're in Budge training. So it's a SEAL training, and it's like the toughest of the tough are essentially trying to get there. And I think there's around 137 guys. In the training, and essentially 40 or 30 of them get out of it. It's essentially like Hell Week for the SEAL team or whatever, and they're they're in freezing water, they're picking up these massively heavy boats, and they're doing these things, and essentially there's boat races. So they're doing these races, and if you win the race, the next like race happens or the next, you basically get a free pass of the next the punishment, right? Sorry, the punishment. So say the punishment is 55 push-ups. You don't have to do the 55 push-ups.
You get rest.
You and your team
rest.
get that rest, essentially. Yeah, you get the rest if you win the race. So that means essentially everyone is trying as hard as they can to win every single time because no one wants to go through what they're going through, obviously. And I don't know how many. There's probably 6 or 7 teams, maybe. I don't know how many teams there are, but there were 2 teams individually you're talking about. So was it Team 6 and Team 2? I think 6 was not a good team. Everyone's cursing at each other, yelling at each other, just being very, not a good team members. They're not cohesive. They're not loyal. They're not even working together.
They finished last in every race.
Every race they're finishing last, exactly. So, and there's Team 2. I'm sorry, Team 2 that is just dominating every single race they can. They're efficient. They're working together. They're smooth and everything like that. And so, Team 6, the bad team, the losing team. The team captain essentially was kind of blaming. He's like, well, my guys aren't just as good as they're smaller, they're weaker, all these different things. And Team 2, has these big guys, etc. So what they decide to do is they take Team 6 and Team 2. They call both team captains over, and they're like, hey, we're switching you guys. Team 2, the winning team that's very good, is going to Team 6, the losing team of the entire week. Team 2. Bad team, hey, you switch, you go to that winning team and see what happens, right? So, it was Leif. Was it Leif?
Leif Babin, yeah.
Leif. Okay, so yeah, Leif was telling the story. So he was interested, like, man, could this actually make a difference? So long story short, Team 6 that was winning everything still did pretty good. They didn't dominate like they used to, but they were getting first and second, mainly second, because Team 2, whatever that leader was doing, was working. And it was working really good because Team 2 came out of nowhere and they started winning a lot of these things. So it does go to show you leaders definitely can make a huge difference when it comes to these kind of things. And you can touch on some things if I left something out or whatever you had to come with.
Yeah,
next.
that was that was the basis of it was if you took the worst team and the best team and you swapped the leadership of that team. Yeah. So just one person.
This is what happens.
Right?
Yeah.
That basically for the rest of the duration of the exercise, they both came in first and second place.
Yeah. So
that the first team that the leader developed was still a great team and great unit. Had really no impact that the leader left. The impact was shown on the team that was in the last place, and they went to first place.
Yep.
Just by putting one leader there.
Just one man change.
And that was the example of no bad teams, only bad leaders.
Yeah.
Which, to me, that's pretty humbling. If you have to, think about how many bad teams are around there, and you are basically saying that those are all bad leaders. They can improve.
Yeah.
They can get better.
Yeah.
But no bad teams, only bad leaders.
So essentially, it's kind of weird when you think about it. So you're saying like, oh man, every bad team, like in college football, a lot of teams, all the bad teams, all the coaching and the head coaches are just bad leaders. When you think about it like that, it's like, nah, it's kind of hard to think. It's like, no, like Wisconsin's head coach is not a bad. I shouldn't say it's Wisconsin. I didn't mean to. I just picked a random team and did the Big Ten. I'm sorry. X team, head coach is 2-15, but last year they went 13. They were winning season then losing season. So it's like when you go back and forth from season. So it's like, man, is that really true? It's hard to think about. It's like, well, according to them, and I believe it. I think if there is a bad team, you can't blame. You should blame the leader. Yeah, sorry, I almost messed that up. So if there's a good team, good leader. Bad team, bad leader.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's how I see it. And it makes sense when you really, really, really think about it. So
yeah, I think the hardest thing for me was in high school. If you're coaching high school basketball,
when you're coaching,
right,
yeah.
or football, there's some times where you don't have the talent.
Yeah,
and you can have a bad team record. But I think. It just, to me, that was hard it's still hard. Because if the talent disparity is there, no matter how good of a leader I think somebody is, I don't know how much that impacts. I shouldn't say that. I think a leader can take a 2-14 team and make them a 8 team. I think that can be the impact. But I don't know. I think there's a limit on what an elite leader can do at the high school level in different scenarios.
I would agree with that. I've been around a lot of teams. I've seen a lot of specific basketball. Football is a little bit different because there's so many players. But when you watch a basketball team, there's like 10 guys. You can see how good and how athletic and how skillful these players are for basketball. You can watch that and be like, man, these guys are good, and they could definitely beat this other team. But that coach just isn't good enough to make it happen. We would do this. We'd be like, hey, if you switch coaches, who's gonna, what team could win? And you'd be like, well, that team's way athletic and way more skill, and that they're just poorly led. If they had a good leader, they'd probably win the state championship. They had the talent. So I kind of get what you're saying, but at the same time, you can look at some teams and be like, man, the good teams that are underperforming have a bad leader. But so it's kind of, and it's interesting to look at your point of saying like, man, you have a terrible team, no skill, not many athletic people, can't do anything, best leader in the world. They're still not going to be, they can't go to the state championship because they just don't have that capability. So it's almost like the capability is capped, and the leader can't make it go any higher because the players just can't play at that high of a level.
Yeah.
Which is hard to think about because then it's like, okay, well, man, what I just said, is that really true? Then is there really only bad leaders? If there's no bad teams, only bad leaders? Is that like, what I'm saying? So I think that's a really, really good point to point out at the high school level speaking.
Yeah. It was just an interesting thought for me when I was going through that.
Yeah, definitely an interesting thought, especially for your situation for sure. Because you're in a coach right now. I don't, I've said it before. I've never coached a legit team yet. So but I understand. I can definitely like see how you could think that.
Yeah, and then page 54, one of my favorite quotes that I've taken for coaching purposes. It's not what you preach; it's what you tolerate.
That's good. I didn't write that down, but I remember that for sure.
Yeah, so you can say defense, defense, defense.
Yeah.
But if you spend an hour and a half of your practice on offense, you don't mean defense, defense.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But that was one of my things where it was like, it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'd speak a little more because I'm not sure. I'm not saying I don't understand it, but like, so you're saying like, so it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. Tolerating what essentially?
I want the toughest team on the court.
Yeah.
And then you play two guys who can score 30 points a game, but won't dive on the floor for loose ball.
Gotcha. Okay.
You're preaching defense and toughness, but you're tolerating offense. You're tolerating them to not be tough.
So you're tolerating what you don't want, essentially, right?
Yeah. Well, basically, it's just kind of like what you're allowing your players to do.
Yeah.
Right. If you allow a player who scores 30 points a game to not dive on the floor, to not fight over a screen, to not be a tough-minded player on the defensive end of the floor.
If that's what you're preaching.
If that's what you're preaching, right? You're preaching you want toughness and you want players to dive on the floor and you want players to do X, Y, and Z. But then you're actually not doing that. Like you're allowing them to do whatever they want.
It's almost like a new coming freshman comes in and this dude is just a baller. And you're like, but like you said, he doesn't do X, Y, and Z that you want.
I have a good example.
Okay, good.
Do you remember when Braxton played for 8th grade basketball?
Yes.
We played at Wakefield.
Yes. And
he got technical.
Yes.
And he was the best player on the team.
Yep.
And Dad took him out.
Yep.
And didn't play the rest of the game.
Yep.
That's what he tolerates.
Yeah. Okay.
Dad does not tolerate anything. He will lose a basketball game because he does not tolerate that kind of behavior.
Yeah. Definitely.
Some coaches can say that. You can say, you're not going to play the rest of the game if you get technical.
Yeah.
But then they get technical and you're down 4 with a minute left. And you want to win and you leave them in.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But essentially when you do that, you're kind of, that player is like, okay, I can do it.
Oh, yeah, it's a problem.
Boom, done.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah,
so that's a good example of.
That was a great example.
Yeah,
Very
it's not what you preach, what you tolerate. Yeah. So that was one of my favorite quotes. And then he talks about where he deals with in a meeting, in a business meeting, where the CEO, I think, says, we aren't winning, but we're making the right decisions.
Yeah.
And then he was like, if you aren't winning, you're not making the right decisions.
Yeah, it's just like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah,
like,
I thought that was great.
You can't be.
Well, and I think also at times we can get caught up in, like, it's not working, but I think, we're still doing the right things. Right?
Yeah.
It's like I want to lose weight, And it's like I go to the gym once. I'm like, I'm going to the gym, but you're not losing any weight. It's like you're not actually going to the gym. You're not actually making the right decisions.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Because it's more. Because there's so much more than goes into specifically losing weight, obviously.
Right.
And I'm not gonna get into all that right now. But so it's I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So I thought that was really good. I was like, it's right.
Which I think a lot of coaches, would think that like, man, we're just not winning, but like, man, we're practicing hard. I got all these guys. They're real tough. They're doing X, Y, and Z, exactly what I want. I don't know what else to do. It's kind of like you're just like getting complacent. It's like, man, there's nothing else we can do. Let's just keep going to what we're doing.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Yeah. Like for when I coach my teams.
Yeah.
Basically, sometimes we'll do the right things, but we don't score.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, okay, you have to kind of play the mind game.
Mm-hmm.
Is the system right? Is the scheme right? Are you maximizing your player's potential?
Yeah.
So we won, 2 years ago, we won 3 of our first 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
Playing pretty well. But one of our better athletes, had like 5 points total.
Yeah.
And I was like, he should have more. Like, why isn't he having more?
Mm-hmm.
And we had to make the switch to go to a different system offensively.
Yeah.
And he averaged, I think, 15 points a game the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like what we were doing, it was kind of working. Like we could okay, we're winning a couple games, but would we be building the best offense and the best team moving forward?
Yeah.
The answer was no.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to kind of, I think it's an ego, a part of the ego anyways, is, okay, are you making the right decisions?
Yeah.
And you have to honestly answer that for yourself.
Yeah. You gotta take like a self assessment, but like a legit one, not like I'm doing good. No, it's like a legit,
right.
Like write things down. Like, okay, this is what's happening. Am I legitly doing a good thing?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And here's what's actually happening, not what you think is happening, and not what you are perceiving to happen.
Yeah, and I think
Right.
even taking like maybe an outside approach to it is like, man, am I doing good things? Do your self assessment, and then go ask someone that is loyal to you. For me, I'd be like, hey, Gib, I'm doing this. I'm doing everything right. What do you think? And you'd be like, nah, man, you're not doing that right at all.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, wait, what? So it's kind of like everyone is like this. You're just self-biased toward yourself because you just think, everyone thinks that you're doing the right thing because this is what you think is the right thing to do.
Right.
But when you ask somebody else to, hey, step in, come tell me what I'm doing wrong, then you're like, wait a second. You're saying I'm doing something wrong? Then so it's like getting fresh eyes on it and then asking. I think you should always ask at least one other person that you have known for a long time, really, really trust, to come in and help you and say, hey, am I doing this right? Because I think it's hard to be like, well, am I doing this right? You write everything down yourself. Like, yeah, I think I'm doing everything else right. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a self-assessment. I think at some point you should be able to bring somebody else in that you can trust, like I said, and have them look over some stuff as well.
Yeah.
Well, how do you think about that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to have those mentor type figures.
For sure. Yeah.
To be like, I mean, Dad's a great example.
Oh yeah.
Dad will sit down with us for 20 minutes and tell us everything we're doing wrong.
Yeah, and he has no problem doing it.
No, he doesn't. Just because he'll have us do 2 or 3 tests, and he's like, oh, here's what you're doing wrong. Here's why.
Yeah.
And it's simple. But I think that's a really, really important point.
Yeah.
Is to having somebody be able to be there and be like, this is incorrect.
Exactly.
And here's why.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else from chapter 2?
Let's see. Yeah, I swear I didn't look at it, but yeah, so that's a really honest self-assessment with yourself.
Nice.
I think it was interesting that he mentioned 2 types of leaders. It's literally just effective or ineffective, and it's kind of what you were saying. Like, I don't remember what you said. Sorry, but yeah, but being like, it's really simple when you break. It's almost like, all right, you're all in or you're all out. Either you're doing good things and you're effective, or you're not and you're ineffective. So I feel like it's just like a all or nothing scale of like, hey, am I being effective? Yeah, I think I'm somewhat effective as a coach. Like that should not be your answer. You should be like, yeah, I'm being really effective, or no, I am not affecting these kids and I am not winning.
Yeah.
So I think that was a good point to like, instead of saying like, yeah, I'm a 6 as a coach, because that's just mediocre. Like, who wants to be mediocre and be a 6 out of 10?
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I really, really liked. I was like, man, okay, am I being effective right now? And if the answer is no, then you got to do something to fix that.
Yeah.
There's only 2 types of there's only 2 types of leaders and coaches. It's effective and ineffective. So if you like, hey, Gib, am I being effective? And you're like, no, I don't think you're being very effective. then you're ineffective and you need to change something to become effective again. You know,
Yeah.
so it's kind of that's kind of what I took away from it, and I really like that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That was a great point. And one of the things with that though is an interesting thing for me. The way I look at me personally as being an effective leader is in 5 to 10 years, are the players that I coach gonna text and call me and invite me to their weddings?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where I hold myself on that scale.
Yeah.
And I think it could be different for, I mean, obviously, if you're building a team and in this season, the effective versus ineffective is pretty binary as far as wins and losses and championships. I mean, that's, you're either effective, winning and losing, or you're not.
Yeah.
You're ineffective. And so for me, the hardest part with that, when we talk about championships, how many people win a championship every year?
One.
Right, one in that division.
Yeah. I'm talking about
Right, I mean, like one NBA,
a state championship,
one 4A. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of people win state championships, but only one win it in their class.
like a specific championship.
Yeah, like if you win the 4A basketball championship,
one team,
one team,
can do
right?
it only.
So I think thinking about effective leadership as only winning a championship may not be the end all be all. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is the goal.
Oh, yeah.
But if we're using that as the standard, then everybody is an ineffective coach every year besides one person.
Does one coach,
and I don't think that's accurate, right? So when we talk about applying it to maybe sports, you have to look at the effective leaders lead high performance teams in how they perform in every situation of every game.
Good point.
The ineffective will not show up for 3 games, and then show up for 2. I think that's probably the more accurate scale, in my opinion.
No,
when it comes to high school coaching. Chapter 3, Believe. They started this chapter off with it's kind of a long story, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like a brief thing. So we're gonna make
it actually
a
was some
brief thing.
pages. Yeah, it was a lengthy thing. It was good. It was a good read. It was fun to read. I enjoyed reading it. But
It was very intriguing.
It really was. It
went
was
in depth, yeah. And so basically, the basic premise was, when they were in Iraq, they had to fight. They had to they had to have at least a certain number of Iraqi soldiers
for them to get approved to go in.
to get their missions approved.
Yes.
To conduct those missions. And when Jocko first heard about it, he was upset and did not agree with it, which rightfully so. They were not as well equipped or as well trained. So it was kind of a disadvantage for the SEALs in that position. And so, before Jocko could even go to his men with it, he had to believe in the mission himself.
Yep.
So he went to his superior, talked about it, probably vented, probably expressed some frustration with it, with the decisions being made at least. But when the decision comes from such a higher place, doesn't matter if you vent to your superior. Yep. It's going to get done. So he had to ask himself why. Why did they have to execute the mission with Iraqi soldiers?
Yeah.
And he had to ask himself why first before he could get his team to buy in to the idea why. And the idea behind it that he expressed to his team was, if they don't train or properly educate these Iraqi soldiers, then who's going to fight the battles in 15, 20 years? They're kids, basically.
Yeah.
And so he knew a leader's actions and words carried great weight. I thought that was a very interesting statement because, I think in today's age of social media, we don't always think how much weight our words or actions are going to carry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think because we can fire off a tweet or a post real quick, venting or frustrations, I think sometimes that can get diluted. And so I think keeping that as a reminder is really important, that no matter what you say or do as a leader, your subordinates or your team is going to really, really take to heart whatever you're saying.
Yeah. No, definitely.
So he explained why to his team, and they didn't have to like it or even agree with it, but they had to understand why, right?
Yeah.
Because if they didn't understand why, then they wouldn't buy into the mission. pretty
I was
self-explanatory.
gonna say, yeah, not much I mentioned on that one, but yeah.
Yeah. And so a leader must believe in two things: the mission and himself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a extremely intriguing idea, especially for coaches,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you don't believe, if you're an assistant and you're on a staff and you don't believe what the offensive coordinator is doing, right? You don't believe in what they're doing.
Yeah.
When it's time for you to run the skill development portion, let's say he's out, or let's say you're running skill development, you're not going to teach it with the amount of enthusiasm and directness you would if you asked why.
Yeah.
If you went to him and figured out why he taught that way, or, you know, at least understood why it was being done that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes back to the why aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask and understand why before you can actually go and teach that to your team.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think is super interesting for you as somebody who will be joining a staff of sometime soon,
Yeah.
right? At some point, keeping that in mind. And I think being a younger coach, always asking why has been one of the biggest things for me.
Mm-hmm.
Figuring out why teams do whatever they do, whether I agree with it or not,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of what he's talking about. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I wrote one thing down. It says, I wrote down like once the team knows why, then they will be able to put full effort into the mission. So yeah, it's like kind of you're saying like, well, why are we asking why? You know, so then we know what we're doing. We know where, you know, well, as far as Jocko, they know what they're gonna fight for, you know, but then we know like what we're gonna play for, you know, all those things. So I think knowing why, you can actually like, once you know why something's gonna happen, then you believe in it, and then you can fully put everything into it. So yeah.
Yeah. And excuse me. He said when he was talking about the CEO,
Yeah.
remember I had that compensation plan,
Yeah.
and the subordinate leaders were kind of pushing back against it,
Mm-hmm.
and a big part of it was they didn't understand the why. And so he got the CEO to come down and have a meeting and explain the why a little more, and then the CEO left. And I want to read off what Jocko said next to them.
Yeah.
He said, he asked the question, who is to blame for the CEO not explaining this to you in more detail? You. Talking to all of them,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of them. If you do not understand or believe in the decisions coming down from your leadership, it is up to you to ask questions until you understand how and why those decisions are being made. Not knowing the why prohibits you from believing in the mission. When you are in a leadership position, that is a recipe for failure, and it is unacceptable. As a leader, you must believe.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah.
And that kind of summarizes and encapsulates what we've been talking about,
Yeah.
right? Not knowing the why prohibits you from believing in the mission. And that's big, because if we're talking about the mission winning,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about the mission. So if you don't know the why, you're not going to succeed as a leader.
Yeah. And you'll not have a winning team.
Yeah.
Making you ineffective.
It all wraps together.
Exactly.
What else did you have on chapter 3?
Yeah, I said that was really good. What you just read, saying, when you're not the leader, being the person to be like, okay, I don't know what's going on. Let me ask why this is happening. You know, because every time, anywhere in your life, unless you're somehow the leader, like the number one guy, you're gonna report to someone most likely, unless you start your own business, do certain different things. Obviously there's different exceptions, but mainly when you have a job and you do these things, you're gonna have a leader you got to report to. So you have to be able to be okay with asking somebody why, right? You have to be okay with being like, man, I don't understand. Let me ask why, even if it's like, I think in the story they're saying, well, she's super. I don't know what she said.
Intimidating.
Yeah, intimidating. She's successful. She knows the business. She knows everything. It's like I don't want to go ask her like, hey, why are we doing this? Because then it comes off as like insubordinate. All those things. So I think being okay with that though, being okay, I don't understand why, but so I can't be effective if I don't know why I'm doing something. And then on the flip side, what I wrote down as when you are a leader, be able to be approachable. I think that's a big thing. And like in the story, she thought she was approachable. She was telling Jocko, she's like, yeah, I think we're good. Me and the team are, they understand what's going on. When they didn't, she didn't have the grasp as good as a leader. She, good as a business, she could run. She thought that they could come to her, but then they didn't want to because they were intimidated. So I think being mindful of that as a leader, the higher you get and the more successful you become as a leader of a basketball team or a football team or any sports team or anything, being that leader that's saying, like, making it vocalized, hey guys, if you guys don't understand, you guys have a problem, like, literally, like, please come talk. Like, I'm not just saying that to say, like, please come talk to me. Like, I'm open. Like, I'm here and I want you guys to understand what I'm doing. So I think being approachable would be a big thing, to keep in mind when you're doing that. So
yeah, and I think with that comes two things. One is, it's one thing to say, hey, my office is always open.
yeah,
Or like, hey, come and find me, ask me questions, talk to me. And it's another thing to actually build a relationship with those people, and so they know that you're approachable, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense.
Because you can, just by having the title CEO can be really intimidating to some people. Some people really don't like talking to their bosses.
Oh, for sure.
Which is fair. But if you build that relationship and then you're able to basically say, in through more than just words, hey, I'm always open to talk. You can trust me. I can explain these things in more detail if it's unclear. It's better than just, having a formal meeting like that and even being like, my office is always open.
Yeah, because that's cliche. That's a thing everyone, like, we've always heard forever.
It's a thing to say. Yeah. It's easy. And then the second thing is, when you have, like, for my players, I wouldn't just be like, do you guys understand? I would ask them questions or give them scenarios to make sure they understood.
Yeah.
Because they could say, yeah, I understand, coach. I got you. But then they go out in the court and they don't have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they didn't really understand. And it's another thing to set up, say, hey, draw, the team is hard hedging the pick and roll, draw the play we'd run to call against that. Because not only do they know, like, they know our play call angle, right? But they know why we're running that play in that scenario.
Yeah.
We're running it because this team is trapping the pick and roll, and if we run this play, we will get a layup because of the way they're guarding it.
Yeah.
Versus just, hey guys, run this play. It's a bigger thing than just run, do this.
Exactly. Same with the quarterback. That's a very good example, because every single time he has to get up there and he's doing a pass play, you got to look at what coverages are in. If you don't look what coverages are in, you just run the play blindly, you're going to throw a pick probably 80% of the time, so it's knowing the why you're going to run, a corner instead of a post, make the hot route, or, exactly. So it's just, I think it's a really good point.
All about clarity with that. Anything else that you had on chapter 4 or 3?
Oh, 3. Yeah, I did say one more thing. I think being a true believer in the mission. We kind of touched on that, and then it said in the book, you won't take risks to win if you're not a true believer in the mission. So if you don't truly believe in that mission and you're just kind of running it just to run it, you're going to become complacent, and you're not going to be able to take the risks to win, to succeed and be, effective. So I think it's very important that, being a true believer in the mission. So I think that's all I wanted to kind of touch on that point, and that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now to my favorite chapter, chapter 4. Check the ego.
Yep.
Check the ego.
This was not my favorite chapter.
This has been my biggest struggle from a leadership standpoint, is, and in my opinion, one of the biggest things that I've seen coaches on a coaching staff especially struggle with is the ego.
Oh yeah.
Because everybody wants to do things their way, because their way's the right way, because that's what they've done and what they found success with, or they've always just kind of done it that way, which in itself is a problem. But just the ability just by itself to downplay your ego, checking your ego, is one of the biggest things I can think of for a younger coach and leader to do.
Yeah.
It's the biggest thing that I can encourage you every day to have like an ego diary and talk about what you struggle with from your ego that day. Because it'll open up your eyes. You know, you make a decision at work or an argument at work, and the other person may be right, may be wrong. But your ego is like, I'm right. I'm always right.
Yeah.
I get caught into that all the time. I think especially online, we can get caught up in that. Because
I think it's easier to get caught up in line.
Yeah, because when you're online, you're not face to face. You're not talking to an actual human in your mind. I mean, you are talking to an actual human, right?
Yeah,
and
for
that
sure.
they are a person on the other end.
Yeah.
But like when I post something and people respond, I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. I have no idea if they know what they're talking about.
Exactly.
Maybe they do. So I think that's my biggest challenge is the social media aspect of it, is to get out of the negative viewpoint almost at times of people responding and trying to figure out like, why would they respond that way? Why am I right in this scenario? Now there are a lot of idiots out there.
Yeah. Gotta be careful.
You don't overthink it.
Yeah, don't be like, is this guy right?
Yeah, but
is the world flat?
I mean, I do think the well, we can no, I'm just kidding. But I do think it is important to at least have a thought process behind it before we really overlook things, just like dismissing them.
No, for sure.
You know, because it is easy to have somebody respond to something and you just dismiss it.
Yeah.
Because you think they're wrong.
Because you're like, oh, it's internet. You know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And you don't have to respond, but you can at least have a thought process of like, why did that comment come? You know.
No, for
like
sure.
that.
Definitely.
Yes. So I had one of the biggest things is there's no place for ego, and it's only the mission. Right? No place for ego, only the mission.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty crucial. And I think it's important that that's a message we convey to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, our coaching peers as well as the team. Because if everybody lost their ego, and I think that's what you see with a lot of professional teams, why they succeed.
Yeah.
Is and Spurs and Greg Popovich talked about that a lot, where they draft players who are over themselves.
Yeah.
Right? That was his phrase. We draft players who are over themselves. As in they don't, like Tim Duncan.
Yeah.
He just wanted to win.
Yeah.
Kawhi actually said it. Kawhi Leonard said in his interview last night he had 45 points, and he could have broken his own personal record. Right, and he's 45. I think he equaled it. They came out with like 5 minutes, and they asked him about it. He said, "No, it's only about just winning. Like, personal records don't really mean anything to me."
I mean, yeah, I think of that. I think of the question like, would you rather for a whole basketball year? Would you rather ride the bench and maybe get a couple minutes of playing time and win every game, or would you rather average 30 points and be the all-star and almost lose every game? You know, and I think a lot of people, especially younger, I mean like maybe 13 to 10 or, you know, you really kind of young, they'd be like, oh, I'll average 30. You know, they want to be the guy, they want to be the star. But me, it's like, man, if we're winning games, let's win some games. You know, so I think it comes down to like when you really think about that kind of question, and not that extreme, you know, not to those extremes, like you just never play. It just means like, are you willing to take a step back, like you said, and then like, be like, hey, I just want to win. I don't care if I have 45 points. So what? I had 45 points. I had 3 points. Did I still win? Sweet, we won the game. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of just like being mindful of that and like what you really like, what your actual goal is. So, or I should say mission, because that's what you've been saying. So,
scoring 30 is fun.
Scoring 30 is fun, but I would rather win.
Maybe. Yes.
Just
I
maybe.
Agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's just me, and I think that's what, like, you know, Dad, you know, installed in us growing up. So
yeah, I think that definitely helped us for sure.
Oh yeah,
sure.
definitely. Yeah.
And then he told the story of the that elite unit.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
You
want to talk about it?
I don't remember exactly. Like, I knew it was the one in the 500 verse or something like.
Yeah, the first in the 506.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So like I think like they came in and they were, had been other soldiers and that they weren't SEALs, but there were other soldiers, American, that were there fighting in one of the heavily in Iraq, and one of the heaviest populated, like straight out war, like gunfire is going there all the time. And then this other unit came in that were SEALs, and they weren't really, they had some facial hair. They weren't clean cut. They, they didn't really respect authority that well. They thought they knew everything, and they kind of, went about their business that way. And long story short, they had to get, removed from the situation because they just weren't following rules. They weren't to the mission. They thought they were better than the other soldiers that had been there, that had been fighting and knew what they were doing, So they thought they were better, so then they had to be taken out because it was just too risky. Jocko didn't want, he was worried about the mission being he didn't want to risk the mission, right? Is that, you can touch on some things if I miss some stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is the people or the soldiers who were there before had a lot of experience, like you said, and they had tips and tricks and the exact amount of ammo and the exact amount of things that you needed to do in a dangerous war zone. And that unit just didn't want to hear any of it. Didn't really want to be involved, and so they ended up having to be relieved of that mission and go on to different missions. And Jocko even said they could have done some serious damage if they stayed,
because they were highly qualified and very, very good soldiers and very good SEALs.
Yes. And so the next comment that I had was or I guess quote was, ego clouds and disrupts everything.
I have that down. I have that written down too.
Yeah,
I thought that was really good.
I was like, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest one is cloud. Okay, for me it clouds everything, because I think I'm right on a lot of things. I mean, especially if you do the preparation, you do the studying, you prepare and you do things the right way.
Yeah.
You think that way is the right way, when it may not necessarily be.
No, definitely correct.
So yes, that was one of my favorite quotes.
I thought, because you said you touched on like how it clouds everything for you. I think mine's more disrupts everything for me personally. Like for an example, back, like, I mean, a couple years ago before my back injury, I was like, I was a strong dude in the gym. So when I would walk into the East Carolina gym, at college, I would walk in and I'd be like, man, I'm the biggest dude. I hated looking at people like, why is that guy bigger than me? You know what I'm saying? Then like, it would disrupt everything. I'd be like, my ego, like, oh my gosh, why, he's lifting more than I am. All those things that come into play. It's like my ego, like, oh my gosh, like, why can I not, it's all that different things. So it's like, it just disrupts your whole workout essentially. Because now I'm focused on, in the mirror, I'm doing some bicep curls, and I'm in the mirror checking this, looking at this guy like, oh, how why, all those things. So, it just disrupts everything. When I just focus on yourself, he might be stronger than you, but he's not lifting with the correct form, and he's going to get hurt doing it, So there's a number of things that could do it, but if you just focus on yourself and you put the ego at the door, and you just go in, get your stuff done, get your workout done, who cares? You know what I'm saying? So I've gotten a lot better at, like, who actually cares about, especially in the gym. Because I think in the gym, a lot of people need to check their egos and keep them at the door. Just forget about it. Just come in, do your business, keep your head down, don't talk, do it, and then get out. So I think that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, I think my favorite ego quote is, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing for egos, at least, how they get inflated almost, or even like just, you're concerned with what other people are doing, but comparison is the thief of joy. I think that's a really, really, really important quote for the ego, at least.
Oh, definitely for the ego. 100%.
Okay, so building for next week, for me at least, what I want to do is have an ego diary for me. You can do it too. And basically just kind of track and chart whenever I feel like my ego is getting a little too big, right? A little too exciting. Just so that way I can kind of see where I'm at and gauge where I am.
Yeah.
So if you ever feel like, your ego is getting out of control, or something that maybe something negative was caused by your ego, that's something that I think would be important to do and kind of keep track of. Anything else that you have from the first 4 chapters of Extreme Ownership, Part 1?
Oh yeah, I have one more thing about the ego. I wrote down, never get like complacent and never think that your enemy is or like, why that, no, sorry. It's never think you're too good enough to fail, And I said your enemies, or think your enemies are not capable to exploit your weaknesses, is what he said in the book as well. And I thought that was really good, because it's like, if you're like, you take a powerhouse like Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, all those really, really, really good college teams. All those have really good coaches, obviously, and they could get complacent and be like, man, I got a dynasty going on here. Why do I need to change anything? And then boom, some LSU comes out of nowhere and beats Alabama. It's because like maybe they got complacent. Alabama's a good school too, so it's probably a bad example. But you know what I'm saying? Like, never think like I'd be like, well, I'm too good to fail. There's no way my recipe for success is gonna not work. Because if you do that and then boom, you think, oh, the enemy, they're not even a good team. They can't beat me. They don't know how to exploit. Never. It's just like, don't ever doubt your opponent and never let your guard down, essentially. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah,
a good reminder.
The enemy gets a vote.
Mm-hmm.
I like that from Jocko.
That's pretty
the
sweet.
enemy gets a vote.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Because I don't know if it's from this book, but it might be from this podcast.
Yeah.
But the enemy gets a vote. That's always something that I use, because the other team has a choice too.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going out there to win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was really good.
For sure. All right. Any last parting words?
No.
All right. Where can we find you on social media?
Right now I have a Twitter. It's a new Twitter, and it's just my name, Brock Piper. That's it.
At Brock Piper.
It's at Brock_Piper.
There you go.
PYPER.
Awesome. And I am at Half Court Hoops. It is mostly basketball. So if you're not into basketball, might not be the best follow. But yeah, I look forward to doing part 2 next week.
Definitely.
Our podcast will drop every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Please subscribe and rate, and let me know how you guys are doing in your leadership journey. Until next time.
Thank you.